Hello, everybody. Welcome to DePINed Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Trowbridge. I'm thrilled to have here Ali, co-founder of NATIX. Welcome, Ali.
Hi, Tom. Yeah, thanks you for having me.
Listen, let's dive right into this. Ali, tell us about NATIX. What are you guys doing?
So at NATIX, we're creating the largest camera infrastructure in the world without owning a single camera, the same way that Uber created the largest taxi network in the world. Why camera? Because camera, I believe, is the most powerful sensor that you can tap into, especially when it's combined with computer vision AI. It can do pretty much what a pair of eyes and a human brain can do. So you can imagine with the pace of AI at the moment, the way that it's growing, it's really, I would say, sky's the limit. And one of the first applications of this camera network that we have realized is to create fresh maps of our world. So the first flagship product that we have is a mobile application. You just download the app on your phone. We basically tap into your smartphone camera. You put the phone on the dashboard of your car. As you're driving around, the AI works on your phone, purely edge computing, to scan the road, to detect what the AI is trained to detect, like potholes, traffic congestions, and so on. And you actually earn reward for contributing with your infrastructure and to contributing from the data that you're extracting from the roads.
And so how is this? I know obviously HiveMapper does something similar. They do it with purpose-built dash cams. You're doing it on your phone. So that's an important, very important distinction. Can you talk a little bit about one versus another?
Yeah, so I get this question asked a lot. One of the main differentiators between us is that we have a smartphone-focused strategy. We're not against hardware. We have always foreseen how. I mean, if you look at our white paper since 2022 that we published this, we always saw NATIX enabled, hardware cameras essentially. We come from the hardware business, but in this case, we realized a normal dash cam cannot offer anything beyond what a modern smartphone can offer. A modern smartphone has has AI accelerated chip, which means that it can run computer vision AI very, very efficiently. It has a very good camera. It even has LiDAR. The new iPhones since a few years, they have LiDAR. It's not very long range, but I'm just saying this to elaborate on why smartphones. And we realize it's a far more scalable solution because it's a commodity hardware. People don't buy a smartphone to get a Lamborghini from it. They buy it because they want to use it for Facebook, Instagram, for work, sending emails and so on. So it's very easy for us to tap into it and to scale. And as of today, we have 1.5 billion smartphones out there with AI chips, over 6 or 7 billion smartphones in general. And this is kind of the size of the network that we can build eventually. This is the total addressable network. I think I just made that term up. But so smartphone strategy is one of the most important differentiators. But then also when you go into product development strategy, we try to be much more inclusive in terms of who our user base would be. A lot of personas that we attract into our network or we need in our network are drivers, last mile delivery guys. They're not the, typical crypto degen or crypto native user. So the way that we have built our product in many different ways, we try to have something for these guys and appeal to these guys. One of the things that we did, for example, is we have both crypto and non-crypto rewards. The crypto part is quite simple, so very similar to any other DePIN project. The non-crypto part is more like, I don't know if you're familiar, for example, with Sweatcoin, where they have a marketplace and you can tap into other, electronics, AirPods, Oculus, as even other DePIN projects we would put, which is quite popular within our community. And then very big differentiator is we try to add a ton of utility to our product, because if people come to use your product, and this is my comment for all DePIN projects, by the way, if people come to use your product because earning is the only added value that they can get into their lives, they will leave your product, as well, when the token is not performing well, or, when they cannot sell the token at the end of the day. So the good old way where I come from is to provide utility to your users. And that's why we started to add a ton of utility for the drivers, like dash cam. You can record your trip in case you get into an accident. Navigation, you can basically get the same quality that you're gonna get from Waze or Google Maps, or even like some ADAS functionalities we are working on, like lane assist and collision warning, which is very good added value for the drivers. So drivers come to our product, hopefully, because they get a ton of other added values and not just because they're earning NATIX or some non-crypto products.
Super interesting. Well, there's a lot to get into there, and I want to dig into those rewards. I want to dig into those rewards for sure. Tell me first about DePIN. You mentioned DePIN overall. It's, obviously I usually start these podcasts by asking the co-founders to describe and define DePIN. A lot of people are going into space. It's getting bigger and bigger. How would you define DePIN?
So I believe how DePIN now everyone is calling everything DePIN. Let me start with that. I was in a conference, actually Token 2049, and I was just having my quick lunch. Somebody was sitting, next to me, and then we started talking, and then was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm a DePIN founder." I was like, "Oh, I have a DePIN investment." And I said, "Oh, really interesting. Which project?" And he said, "Sui." And I'm like, "You mean the layer one?" He said, yeah, Sui. And I'm like, "Okay, but that's not DePIN." It was like, "Okay, so what's DePIN then?" So very good question that you ask, Tom. I think DePIN refers to whenever we need to build a physical or digital infrastructure, and sometimes even a human network, you can tokenize this and bootstrap your network 10 to 100 times, even sometimes 1,000 times faster and cheaper compared to traditional models. And that enables, startups that are, growing out of nowhere with very little funding, with, let's say, pre-seed or even seed stage funding, very small teams, they're enabled to build infrastructures, and they're actually showing results right now that is bigger than, companies that, have injected tens or hundreds of millions of dollars into building those infrastructures. And this is where the interesting part happens. So in general, yeah, I would say whenever you have a digital or physical infrastructure, you can tokenize the network and bootstrap it 10 to 100 times faster.
So I think, listen, I agree with you strongly on everything. How about this as a definition to try on? Crowdsourced physical infrastructure, which is put together in a common network, right? That is secured and incented by crypto economics.
Correct.
That covers a lot. And by the way, just to your point on everyone being DePIN, if you even look, there's a DePIN index, and I forget which company did it, and Solana was in the DePIN index. And I'm like, I know there's plenty of DePIN companies that are built on Solana, and that's great, but Solana itself is not DePIN. Like,
correct.
Come on. So anyway, that's partly why I like having a definition, so we can kind of be a little clear on all this. But you said something super interesting about back to your project, back to NATIX and rewards, and about how you have to provide value other than just rewards. And so I want to break this into two pieces. There's value other than rewards, and that's relevant. And then there's rewards, which are fiat versus crypto. And that's super interesting to us because at Fluence, we pay rewards for proving compute. Those rewards are in our token, but they're calibrated to meet a fiat value. And so it's not an arbitrary token amount, right?
Very
it's
good.
$10 per core per month. Now in FLT, and FLT goes up or down, you get more or less, and then that vests over time. So you're never going to get that $10 amount. But the concept is that it at least is not just an arbitrary token amount. And so, but we don't have the non-crypto rewards. And so I'm kind of curious about your reward schedule and how you are setting that up.
Yeah, so Tom, the way that you describe it to me, and I have been in DePIN for long enough, is, when you guys build your network and your tokenomics, you didn't just copy paste another similar project because back in the times, 3-4 years ago, it was just a simple emission, which usually would even decrease by the network size, right? This is the model that
or time-based halving.
Or time-based halving, exactly. So assuming that because you have more value accrued towards your network, the token price is higher, and therefore, there is a very strong assumption, by the way, which proved to not be right, when the bear market hits, and all these kind of conditions. So we took it very similar to you guys. We said, the physical work that people put into our network, which in this case is driving, having the camera up, and contributing with their data and camera infrastructure, has a certain value, and this value changes over time based on the data that they're collecting, and is also changing over different jurisdictions, right? So the value of a pothole in India is very different from a value of a pothole in Germany, right? So this is something that we need to understand and know before we're designing a new tokenomics model. So the way that we did it was very different. Essentially, we have regions or countries, let's say, and each country has a different reward bucket per month. And this reward bucket per month changes based on network growth, based on token price, based on demand for the data. A lot of these factors can actually change that, right? Suddenly, if our network growth is 2 times from the compared to the previous months, we are going to, if the token price is the same, we are going to increase it slightly. That's our terminology, right? We don't think necessarily that suddenly, because from 1 month to another, we have double the amount of users, the token price will go double, right? So you still need to keep those users engaged and happy. And the way that it works is, if you are right now, let's say in the US, you are competing in the US bucket, and you're part of a leaderboard, you compete in that month, and based on your leaderboard ranking at the end of the month, you get a certain amount of token. Top 60% get token, next 30% get another kind of in-app currency. It's not a cryptocurrency, but it has some economical power in the app. And then bottom 10%, they don't get anything. Again, reason for this is we had some retention and stickiness issues with smartphone, like every other smartphone application, and we wanted to engage consistent and frequent mapping, essentially, right? So that you are on the top of the leaderboard. But yeah, essentially what I wanted to say is, we also don't have a fixed amount of token that people are getting. Even when you're climbing the leaderboard during a certain month, it's basically based on different type of data that you collect. If you also cover a certain blind spot, let's say for NATIX, we have these area-based tasks or missions. If you go and you cover a certain block in New York that we have complete blind spots, and we want to collect data there, you get extra points, right? A multiplier of 3 or 4x, because you're helping us, with a lot of value. So this is kind of the engine that we designed behind it, but we are also in the belief that there is a connection between these crypto incentives and fiat's worth of the work that people are putting into it. There has to be some sort of a relationship.
Real super interesting. But the funny thing is that, or may seem a little not funny, but the interesting piece is, as the participation grows in terms of numbers, being in the top 60% is actually a larger and larger number.
Correct.
Right. And so the larger you are, the sort of easier it is, potentially, the less competitive, maybe. Tell me if I'm right or wrong, because in law of large numbers, you're going to have, if you have 100 people versus 10,000 people, like the 10% at the bottom, it's going to be a larger thing. Right. So anyway, I'm just kind of, it also sort of means then that you have a baseline of your 60% are going to be the ones that are really driving the value of the network. So those are sort of two components to it. And so it's actually, I don't know another project that has done it. Obviously, HiveMapper has these bursts or whatever, these missions where they want to incentivize certain mapping of certain areas. So that, again, I've seen other projects as well. I think Nodal and others do things where they incentivize extra for different pieces. So that I grasp and makes a ton of sense. But I haven't seen the actual participation kind of segmented into 3 layers before. And that's kind of interesting. And so I guess throughout, and that's every month or every week, what's the periodicity of that?
Every month, because it's long
so
enough.
You're tracking.
Correct. Every calendar month, we have very easy, cycles, we call them. Every calendar month, there is a competition in each one of our activated regions. Right. By the way, the entire world is not active at the moment, because there is no point for us to. You also mentioned some very good point. So when the number is too low, we don't activate the region. Also, when we don't have plans to monetize the data, because that would be on unnecessary emission, which is just, bad for the total health of this
Token economics,
economy.
yeah.
Exactly. And if we have below a critical mass in a certain region, we don't activate that region, right? There is a minimum number of active users that we need to activate that region, because below that, it just doesn't make economical sense for us to do it. So the way that we have designed it is that you can still start driving. And if that is an interesting area for us, once the minimum number of users is reached, then we're going to do kind of like a one-off cycle. In that sense, we reward the people who have already mapped for us and contributed, and spread the word and everything until that point, some small amount of reward. And then from then on, we're going to have these monthly rewards. So let's say I give you an example. You're living in Dubai, and Dubai is not activated, but we have plans to activate. You have been driving for the past 6, 7, 8 months. And it comes to a point that we're activating Dubai. We will basically distribute a small amount of token between the people who have already, contributed. Again, if you have been actively contributing, so that, let's say the top 60% until then. But this was not a period of 1 month. This was the period of 8 months, let's say, since the beginning. And then from now on, we do every calendar month. So today we're in October, so it's going to be October. And then next competition would be November cycle.
Super interesting. And you mentioned demand for the data. So let's talk about that side. Who's buying the data? How's that working? How do you feel about demand? And it sounds like that's country specific as well, and probably even more specific than countries as well.
Yeah. It's very much country specific, sometimes even city specific. It's just, building an incentive system which is city specific is extremely difficult, right? So, we even wanted to go city specific, but it was just very difficult for us to implement it technically. It's another discussion over a longer, let's say, podcast that we really deep dive into why it was difficult.
Part two.
Yeah, exactly. But if it was up to us, and if we could have done it in a, simple way, if we had all the power in the world to design the system, we would have gone even city specific, because the demand is city specific really. Who's the customers of the data? So a lot of companies actually have, in one way or form, have navigation or maps integrated into their businesses. When you get a package right now from Amazon or from a delivery company, these guys are using a navigation software, that is planning their entire day essentially to deliver packages in the most efficient, green, fuel efficient, and time efficient way. So these companies are using it. Automotive companies are using it essentially. Then there are consumer apps, which they also need to provide high quality of data, and they need multiple sources of data to be able to do that. But essentially, whom we sell to is a little bit easier than that. We don't go and all the way sell to the last mile delivery guys or the ride sharing or the logistic companies. We sell it to map and navigation service providers that provide these, let's say, stacks towards the end customers. And these guys already have, for each data type, they sometimes have over 1,000 sources of data to be able to provide, consistent high quality data, let's say for traffic or route planning or damages on the road infrastructure, to be able to provide consistent data towards their end customers. So, NATIX would be one of these data sources for these, I would call them aggregator, or at the end of the day, they're map and navigation service providers.
And what happens to that revenue? If NATIX gets in $100, $1,000, $1 million, where does that revenue go? What happens?
Yeah, so we take some small percentage of it towards the R&D of the project, and the majority of it actually goes buyback and burn, as well as it goes towards the stakers, whom are basically in charge of system governance and voting and things like that. So more of it actually we are lean towards doing buyback and burn. That's our value accrual mechanism at the moment. So we did our first buyback and burn event. And then on top of this, by the way, we love burning, to be honest with you. So, we try to capture a lot of, now that we're talking about burning as well, we try to capture a lot of speculative short-term behavior, capture those behaviors, capture some penalties from them or fees from them, and burn those tokens, right? So for example, in the app, we have a 30-day cooldown period. If you want to get your, tokens out into your wallet when you have earned them, you have a 30-day cooldown period or 30% instant withdrawal fee. So if you go and claim your tokens today, you get it in 30 days. Or if you want it really, really now, you do instant withdrawal. You pay a 30% fee on the tokens that you're withdrawing, and that amount we're going to burn. Same thing goes along with our staking platform, right? We have a cooldown period for unstaking. We haven't went live with it, but it's going to go live in the next 1 or 2 weeks max. You have a cooldown period. And if you want to unstake instantly, you have to pay a fee. I think we're going to start with a 30% fee. And people might say, oh, you know, this is, and it's actually on the entire staked amount. And people have told me that it's way too aggressive. And my answer to these guys is, you know, we are building a project that is for the next few years. So if I am, you know, rewarding a certain user, I want to reward users that are aligned with our vision for multiple years, right? And Tom, actually, interestingly, I have data to support that whenever you reward these kind of behaviors and these kind of users that have been with you for a very long time and have the, let's say, the willingness to be with you for a longer time, suddenly, you know, it's a different kind of audience that you're rewarding. They're much more careful with your token. You know, they're like, you know, holding it as if they were kind of part of your company, right? Because as a founder, if you're building a good project, you know, I mean, it's called rug pull if you do it, but you don't go sell your tokens even if they get unvested, you know, at a certain point of time, because you actually believe in what you're building. If a founder does that, it's actually unethical, and it rings a lot of bells, you know, and basically it raises a lot of flags, and that project is, to me, that is burned, right? A lot of founders don't do it. If you go with the most successful, you know, layer ones and the projects that are still surviving, the founders haven't liquidated, and they couldn't even liquidate, you know, everything that they have, or the company or the treasury. So this is the same way, you know, they're basically treating it for the long run. And I think it's very important for every, again, DePIN project to reward both people who have been in the project for a very long time, not just people who drop by and leave. So these airdrops, I have a big issue with them. If you do airdrops, you know, do it over a very long period of time, and you will see that those guys will stay much longer with your project.
Of course. Listen, agree with a lot of the stuff you said. Some of it works very well. Some you have to deal with the short-term nature of the crypto ecosystem, which is a little bit of a challenge, but you want to set up the rails and the process to attract the most like-minded, longest term people you can. And that's all the best you can do. You may be fully successful, you may be 80% successful, but that's the best you can do. But the questions I have for you, just back to my original question. First of all, the basically redemption fee burn, love, and then but I was still, if you have $100 of revenue, have you not determined how much is bought back and burned versus keep for the company? So what are those numbers, just out of curiosity?
20% goes towards the R&D, because this data, basically monetization of this data, has cost. The fact that the foundation is developing it and, you know, working on a biz dev, essentially resources to monetize the data. So 20% goes towards the R&D. Right now it's 40%, if I'm not wrong. So 40% is buyback and burn, and 40% goes towards the stakers. But this is actually one of the things that I personally had a conversation with a few very, very smart people. And I think, like, depending on which part of the cycle we are, we can basically change this as well, right? So this is something that I would also love to maybe work with the community. So the structure is going to stay the same, but whether we're going to do 40% buyback and burn or 60% buyback and burn, I think this is something that we can change later on through the projects too.
And out of curiosity, staking, is that, you know, and it's sort of interesting because I don't know, the staking that I'm familiar with is usually in less what I would call you like a physical DePIN versus like a cloud or digital DePIN. And Fluence is more digital cloud. And like you think of Filecoin, Arweave, Fluence, you know, IONET, all those, and their stake is required because the services being performed are virtual. And so cheating is easy, and you have to provide trust, right? And the date you have to, right? So staking is really an important component. You can't have the networks work without staking, you could argue. With the physical networks, and again, compare to HiveMapper or GeoNet or, you know, WeatherXM or a whole bunch of others that actually use physical infrastructure that is more consumer, there's less of a need for trust. And so is staking there more of a token holder reward, a way for people to participate without actually providing the phone. So you're giving the community a way to participate by locking up their tokens, and in return, they earn some piece of network revenue. Is that how it works? It's less of a trust thing. It's more of a involvement.
Correct. And that involvement is them participating in the governance and in the, in the proposals that essentially we put up for vote within the community. It's for the people who are actually actively participating within the network, but not as a data collection node, but in other ways.
But staking is required to vote in your governance?
Correct.
Okay, that's interesting. So staking, you have to stake for some period of time in order for your tokens to be eligible to vote.
Correct. And the longer that you stake, the more voting power you will have. So this is another basically parameter within the governance that we have.
That's interesting, and I've definitely seen that. I think one of the things that people forget is the attacks on voting, and the longer term lockup really helps align incentives with vote weight. So there's even a term for it. I'm blanking on it right now, but it's voting multipliers or token voting multipliers based on time-based multipliers or something along those lines, right? And I think Polkadot was one of the first to do that at scale, I think. But that's interesting, and that I haven't. It makes things a little bit more complex in terms of how you do that. But I get it. The only thing, it is interesting. But the other part to think about that is, don't you get to the same place? Like pick your number. You reward 40% to the people who are locking up, but if instead the rewarding those 40, you burned 80%, the locked up are still going to participate given token value appreciation.
Correct. But for me, at the end of the day, this is one of the problems that I see in many projects. When you do a staking platform, let's say, and there's an APY, if there's a yield, where does the yield come from? People need to ask this question. Again, like the same way that you have a DePIN physical network, in the beginning, it comes from the incentivization pool, but there's so long that the incentivization pool can hold up, right? Otherwise, you're just an inflationary model by design. Exactly. So at some point, you need to have a mechanism that you're capturing outside value towards your economy, and you basically address this, right? In our case, is selling of the data and creating protocol revenue. Same thing goes towards the APY of the staking platform. If we are just pushing that out from the treasury, from the incentivization pool, it's an inflationary model, and the yield needs to come from somewhere. In our case, the yield is coming from protocol revenue, right?
From revenue.
In the long run.
I get it. And that's where it should come from. Totally agreed. And I think you're one of the few, I don't know another DePIN project that has set up, there's buy and burn is rather common. I think that is the kind of like real, hold on a second here. I think that's one of the real kind of special sauces of DePIN is this buy and burn potential, because most networks aren't generating real revenue, right? And DePINs are. And so I think my general theory is you're going to see a huge appreciation in token prices for DePIN projects as the revenue starts to kick in and buy and burn really starts to get traction. I think that's going to change the whole crypto model dramatically. And so that's great. But I haven't seen the voting and governance requiring lockup and rewards going to them. That's also interesting because usually the distinction is the buy and burn people or projects are the physical ones that don't need stake. And the ones that are virtual need stake, but they're not generating revenue because the revenue is going to all the individual providers, right? So, right. And so that is a big sort of dividing line in the ecosystem, yeah. But you're doing both, which I think is super interesting. But let's just zoom out for a second. Revenue wise, customer wise, like help us understand where are you with customer traction? Where do you think revenue can go? How do you sort of foresee, paint the picture of where this network goes, where revenue goes, help people understand how big this can be?
So we have been kind of focusing on I call it scalable revenue, quote unquote scalable revenue, which is very important, right? Revenue is not something that I think is the only indicator that you guys need to look at. Generating, $500,000 ARR is not that difficult, but generating $500,000, which you can grow it into $5 million the next day, is something that requires a little bit more fine tuning and finding the right direction. So with this camera infrastructure that we're building, as I mentioned, providing map attributes or map data, dynamic map data, was something that we have started with, and we're actually closing one of our first clients very, very soon. So it's going to come out. But we found a much more interesting direction for monetizing the more or less the same data and the infrastructure, which is towards autonomous driving. I cannot disclose too much, Tom, but I think in around a month and a half, we're going to publish more information because we have been working on a new product and kind of a new direction for the monetization of the data as well. And I believe this could generate a much bigger amount of revenue for this infrastructure and for the project at the end of the day. So we're going to do both of them. It's not going to be either and or, because it doesn't have to be. But yeah, I believe that the autonomous driving direction is going to generate between 5 to 10 times more revenue in a span of 1.5 to 3 years, next 1.5 to 3 years.
But so, sorry, how does that, I'm not sure I grasp that, because this is a consumer device, but autonomous driving is someone not driving the car. So so help me understand how that ecosystem works.
Yeah. So we're not really tapping into autonomous cars as a data source, but we are going to be selling the data to the autonomous driving companies to use it for part of their value chain, if that makes sense. So our network is going to stay the same. There's still drivers, collecting data from the roads and basically scanning the roads and collecting data from the roads. But the end user is not going to be, or our customer is not going to be map and navigation service providers, but in this case, it's going to be autonomous driving companies.
Gotcha. And listen, I got to imagine their interest and need for data is huge. And to help me understand, they are probably much more interested in the video, right? They want to understand all the video and updated video for their training and for mapping purposes. So I'm going to guess, and help me if I'm wrong here, how do you compete with like a Google Street View as an example, right? Because they're out there, they have data, they can sell it, it's already there. Help understand what you guys are able to do that they can't, or maybe you're complementary. I don't know.
No, I mean, it's a very good question. Again, we go back into, how every other DePIN competes with their traditional Web2 players. Couple of things that we can do, which is very, very interesting. First of all, we can build a network much faster. For these guys, it's much more expensive and slower to build a network, which means they need to ship this, $200,000 cars to these places. Again, Google does a lot of crowdsourcing. They're not stupid. They're doing it. But crowdsourcing without token incentives is just not as potent. It has been shown in many models that many crowdsourcing fail. The only way that crowdsourcing has worked is two-way. I'm going to say it right now. If you already have a fleet of people, doing something to generate for their own value, and you give them a little more piece of device and they're doing that as well, and you pay them a little bit, they're going to do it. So if you're an Uber and you have all of the taxi drivers and you give them a dash cam or this is smartphone app and you say map for me too, they will do it for a little bit of fiat because they're anyway doing it out on the road. The second thing is if you provide them with a lot of utility, so that, in case of Google Maps, I made a tweet and I made fun of it. You give them direction to Taco Bell and they're happy that you use their data, in this case, GPS data, right? So you either need to provide them utility or they need to be already part of the daily job for you. They work for you. And then you just, basically dump this device or ask them to use this app to collect information. Versus with DePIN, we can just build those networks because of the crypto incentive, because it's just much more interesting than even fiat incentive, right? They will feel that they have part of this economy. If this goes to a multi-billion-dollar economy, they will have a piece of it. Assume if Uber was giving some VSOP into every early driver that was driving for Uber in the cities to reach the critical mass, and Uber becoming Uber, right? It's the same similar terminology. So what we can do is actually build networks much faster, much cheaper, and much more efficient. And another thing is that we can mobilize our network. Even if you own an infrastructure, or own some drivers that are going around, these guys will go the routes to deliver people. They're not going to go targeted to cover your blind spots. Now, a project like us, or you said this burst, the version of HiveMapper, or us with area-based missions, we can actually target our users. We can cover any blind spot in our focus regions, Tom, in less than 24 hours. This is insane. When we showed it to a couple of these potential customers, they're already doing mapping. This was an aha moment for them, actually, that, okay, these guys are up to something.
And so help me understand that. You can cover something, you said in 24 hours. A traditional company would take a week, a month to do that?
Naturally, yeah. A few weeks to months.
A few weeks.
And usually blind spots are less visited passes in this sense, right? So there is less chances that this guy is going through those passes because it's not a typical road. It's not the main road, it's some side typical road, and they really need to have a delivery to pass by. And we can just ask the user, hey, go to that direction. I'm going to give you this much.
And then how much cheaper are you than like a traditional Web 2, Google Street View, whatever it would be?
I would argue 80% cheaper, up to 80% cheaper, actually, because of some calculations that we have done from really cost of data collection. Yeah.
But that's what's super interesting, because if I think about value creation of DePIN projects or value proposition, and if you think about it, if you have your data is, pick your number, twice as updated, and you can map a region 4 times faster, right? You're at now 8 times value, right? And then you're 80% cheaper. Right now, you're literally just what would that be? Almost like a 20x, 30x. Right. Value proposition. Now, you can't monetize all of that, right? That's not all monetizable. Correct. And not all that accrues to the customer, et cetera, et cetera. But as a value proposition, you're not talking about something 30% better, 40% better. You're talking about something that is multiple, no matter what, multiple orders of magnitude, or at least 1 or 2 orders of magnitude better than what the existing infrastructure is. And I think that is a value proposition is super compelling.
Exactly. And that's why, Tom, when we talk to these Web2 guys, it basically blow their fuses, right? I mean, they know that we're doing this crypto thing, and many of them are even familiar with Helium. Literally, this is what they tell me, right? When they jump into conversations with us, they're like, we have also heard of Helium doing something similar. And they did it even a few years ago. And it blow their fuses when they see these numbers of how fast we can build those infrastructures, how cheap we can build those infrastructures, and how efficient we can, mobilize the network. This is what gives DePIN an edge. And as the time goes on, this is my personal this is how I see the industry moving. Is a lot of companies are getting grilled right now because of data monetization. I think these networks, if they have substance behind, if they're based on fundamentals, that means the business case fundamentally makes sense. At some point, these infrastructures are going to get too large to be ignored, right? Again, like that's what NATIX is doing. We have the same camera infrastructure and we're tapping into multiple use cases. That's what I told all of my community and everyone, all of my investors, everyone who has been listening. Our vision of NATIX was that, in my opinion, infrastructure is important. What application I push into this infrastructure is the same thing with you guys, right? Compute infrastructure and storage infrastructure is important. And, maybe the killer use case right now is AI, but it wasn't AI, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right? But you saw this years ago. A lot of people saw this years ago that it's going to be, war over compute infrastructure. Same way that I'm telling you, it's going to be war over camera infrastructure. Because there would be a ton of killer applications that you can deploy on this infrastructure and monetize the network. So my projection is that a lot of these DePIN projects are going to get stronger and stronger to a point that Web2 players cannot turn their heads anymore. Cannot ignore them anymore, because it's just stupidity, right? If I can get data 70%, 60% cheaper at scale, and not just cheaper, but I can get the data that I cannot get from elsewhere, why wouldn't I at the end of the day?
And let me ask a question on this. You said right now you've got about 100,000 drivers or 100,000 active phones. Is that something, that number roughly right?
More than that, we have over 170,000 drivers actually in our network.
170, wow. And what's the breakdown geography? Is that mainly US, little Europe, or how's that work?
So it's our focus regions, back into the tokenomics discussion that we have. So it's a lot of it is US. So around 50% is US. Then it goes to UK, a couple of countries in Central Europe, because we're based in Central Europe and we have network here to monetize data. We just opened up a couple of richer countries in East Asia, like Singapore, South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong. And for example, we're looking now into opening up for Middle East, because we have some demand there, essentially some interest for building the network there.
Super. Well, listen, I gotta think that that's one of the challenges of crypto in general is you need to be a global company almost from the beginning. The challenge for you is you also have to global, besides just users, you need global customers, right? So you got to find customers in Dubai, in Korea. That requires a BD effort local to each of those geographies. That is
Correct.
That's a real challenge, right? If you're an L1, you want to have, maybe your documents in each, and you want developers in each, but you don't have to have a specific BD team in every single country going to Web2 companies, but you need to do that to get revenue in each of these regions, right?
That is true. But that is why we said, let's not do this entire world and spray and pray model, because the larger we open up the world, the more we actually have to invest into the BD in each one of those jurisdictions to generate, revenue, so that it's practically feasible over a span of 3 to 5 years. That's why, Middle East is not open yet. We had to start somewhere, and US and Europe is kind of like, it's our base and where we saw a lot of demand happening. So this was our educated bet, and still we can do BD. It's English speaking, is easier. With each one of these new jurisdictions, we are only opening it up when we see demand. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, right? Before we opened up US and Central Europe, because it's our head base and we didn't have demand.
And you want to prove the case.
Correct. It's you need supply to get demand. But now that we show that we can build the supply very efficiently, we don't go and build it before we have the demand. So, we get the projects in Middle East, and then we are like, okay, we can build, or we get the leads in Middle East, and we say, okay, we can build a network for you in 3 to 4 months, right? Because we have the team, we have the capabilities. It's very easy. It's a smartphone base. And then we go and build it in Middle East. So it came to this change, after we launched originally in very few selected regions.
Well, what's interesting, listen, I know the HiveMapper guys and the team pretty well. And, I think you guys each have different things and different strengths. Their cameras are, always on there, right there. Once it's installed, it's probably very sticky. But for you guys, you can probably spin up a network incredibly fast because you don't have to wait for the hardware to be, sourced, bought, installed, et cetera. So you can accelerate. You can probably enter a market really fast, would be my guess, and scale really fast. But my guess is HiveMapper probably is there. It exists durable in a very durable way, and you guys may be that as well, but you can execute much faster, I would think. But speaking of HiveMapper, what other projects are out there that you think are interesting in the DePIN space if we zoom out to DePIN overall?
I find quite a few projects interesting. So I really like Helium Mobile. I think what they did with 5G, because when I got to learn Helium, they were still on the LoRaWAN narrative, and I was finishing my PhD, and I studied wireless communication, and we were working with 5G at the R&D stage back in the times, right? So we had telecommunication companies. We were doing like big projects with them actually for autonomous driving. And 5G is a big part of autonomous driving. And if you understand really how 5G is built, you understand that it's there is no way around building these kind of micro stations. A lot of them, and there is no way around crowdsourcing it, because otherwise it's way too expensive. There is a way, and telecommunication companies are doing it, but if you can figure out a way to crowdsource this, it's jackpot, because you need a lot of these little nodes or base stations because they have lower range, connectivity range, and the best is to crowdsource it, and the best model in crowdsourcing is to tokenize, in my opinion, personal opinion. So Helium Mobile makes a ton of sense. Another thing that I love with Helium Mobile, what they did was that they essentially, basically, like you mentioned, selling B2B is hard in Web3. It's harder, right? So Helium Mobile took a different angle. Before they were selling B2B, let's say to these ride-sharing companies and so on, that they wanted LoRaWAN connectivity. But now they took a different approach and they're selling B2C, which is the eSIMs that are tapping into Helium, mobile network. And in the very beginning, actually, they don't have the entire coverage, right? That's why they also started very small. They started Miami first, if I'm not wrong. And even in Miami, they didn't have the full coverage. So they went and they said, if I got it right, they did some deals with big telecommunication providers, and they said, okay,
yeah, they were
when
MVNO.
we don't have coverage,
MVNO, mobile virtual network, where
correct.
they
said,
used their hotspots, or they offloaded to T-Mobile or whatever else, wherever they didn't have the
correct.
coverage. Exactly.
Correct. So this meant that for their users, they got a very good quality of service from day one, right? They didn't have to wait until Helium has critical mass in Miami. And then as the time went on, they increased their nodes. So right now, I think majority of the connectivities are via their own networks, and even other providers are dumping data, right? This is strategy I really liked. I genuinely, and it worked, right? So lesson learned, P2C is a faster way of monetization in Web3, in crypto. It's just faster and easier. It's not the holy grail. I think still the bigger chunk would be B2B, but it's just faster. It could be the low-hanging fruit, and the model worked. I think GeoNet is another project that I really like from application point of view. They provide precise location using RTK infrastructure. And I think it has a lot of applications within DePIN because location, the same way that in IoT, back in the time when I was very much focused on IoT, location is like a cornerstone of IoT. Pretty much anything that you do with IoT, you need to label the data with time and location. Time is easy. You can have a clock. Well, synchronization is a harder problem. But location, precise location, something pretty much a lot of data collection needs at the end of the day. And yeah, there are a few other projects. I like Peak as well. They're kind of building this layer one specific for DePIN. I find it very interesting. And I know the founders, we kind of grew together, and I saw their path, and they listen, and they really build something that the people need. So I really liked also the project and actually working with the founders. I know all of these projects personally, and I am in touch with the management team or the founders or the team one way or another. So, I mean, DePIN is quite small, right, Tom? We know each other, kind of pretty much every project knows every other project, but these are some of my favorite.
Listen, know all of them, and have had both Helium, and had Mike from GeoNet on the podcast, and he's spoken at DePIN days, as is Helium. So obviously Helium is one of the kind of the core infrastructure project. I think it sort of kicked off the whole thing. I sort of joke it was DePIN before DePIN. So certainly grasp all that. Well, listen, really appreciate the insights and you being on, and look forward to having you back on when we can talk about some more of the autonomous driving and kind of some case study of spinning up a market really fast, so we can really get super clear into that, because I think that's going to make it really, really real to people. And I can't wait to learn about that. Thank you, Ali, for being on. How do people find you? How do people follow NATIX? How do they stake? Give us some ways to get involved.
Yeah, so I would say the fastest way to follow us is on Twitter. For NATIX, you just type in NATIX Network. So that's the handle. For me, it's Alireza Ghods. So my name that you see, Ghods, is my last name, and number 2, that is my Twitter. Everything else, we're also going to publish it on our website. So natix.network is the website. And if you go to the blog section, including information on the staking, we're going to very, very soon publish where they can stake, how they can stake, basically with the entire instruction. And yeah, I would say these 2 channels are the main channels to stay in touch with us. And of course, if they want, one-to-one interaction with us and the team, they can find us on Discord and Telegram through these channels.
Fantastic. Listen, thanks again for being on, Ali.
Thank you, Tom.